The Mexican style of mural making first became widely embraced within the United States in the 1930s. As Americans struggled through the Great Depression, many became disenchanted with the wonders of the capitalist system and the American dream. The Mexican mural movement appealed to many because it incorporated the ideal of community engagement and struck many as the antithesis to American capitalist values. In his text, The Mexican Muralists in the U.S., Lawrence Hurlburt explains, in their staunch affirmation of a public art of social commitment that could bring the artist into meaningful contact with society at large, the Mexicans offered a concrete alternative to the growing sense of alienation and isolation felt by North American intellectuals. The feelings of alienation and isolation referred to by Hurlburt are symptomatic of the modern, an experience which is explained by Dr. Mark Oslander in his course Museums and Public Memory as a kind of marveling at new technology while also mourning the loss of what has been replaced. That which has been replaced is primary experience. Instead, we are endlessly engaged in an inauthentic, mediated experience as we are surrounded by communication technologies and commoditized culture. Full immersion in a modern society such as the United States commonly leads to a desiring of the really real. For Americans plagued by this alienating experience of the modern, they turned an opportunistic eye upon their southern neighbor and found a cultural resource ripe for tapping. Through a lens commonly reserved for tourism, American intellectuals witnessed Mexico above all as organic and as the Mother Earth Mexico. It was this exoticization of Mexican culture that glorified formations of the enticing cultural other and fueled the pleasures of exploitation which the Mexican muralists in the U.S. would feel compelled to resist. In 1932, Mexican muralist David Alfaro Siqueiros was commissioned to paint a mural along Olvera Street for the visual consumption of tourists. The patron requested that the mural depict a Mexican village. The completed mural, titled Tropical America, is far removed from the original design request. Instead, the mural depicts a crucified indigenous figure. An American eagle is perched atop the crucifix, representing the Mexican struggle against U.S. imperialism. Around the same time that Siqueiros was painting America Tropical, Diego Rivera painted a series of murals in Detroit that explored the industrial environment. These murals captured a certain aesthetic beauty in the industrial equipment and machinery of the age. However, the anonymity and posture of Rivera's industrial workers, as well as the artist's personal writings, suggest that Rivera was fully cognizant of the struggle of the worker, fighting for his dignity, even existence, against enslavement by the machines and brutal labor conditions. During the 1960s, in the midst of the larger Chicano movement for civil rights, a resurgence of the Mexican style became part of the creative arsenal used in the struggle for cultural affirmation. In the text Walls of Empowerment, Chicana, Indigenous Murals of California, Gisela Latorre writes, through the public mural, Chicanas and Chicanos found a unique and effective tool with which to assert agency from the margins. The Chicano mural movement accounted for a growing sense of transnationalism amongst Mexican Americans. Although physical movement across borders was largely impaired by immigration restrictions, the Chicana and Chicano consciousness moved freely between Mexico and the U.S. in terms of language and culture. This fluid consciousness represented a growing resistance to acculturation and assimilation and a desire to formulate a new political awareness that incorporated indigenous and American histories. Chicano muralists asserted this newly politicized identity through indigenous iconography, presenting a decolonized and newly empowered consciousness. After looking at murals from the perspectives of America's intellectuals plagued by the experience of the modern, and from the perspectives of the socially driven muralists, I raise the question, whose visual pleasure structures are being satisfied in the viewing of the Mexican and Chicano murals? Are we witnessing an indigenous consciousness emerging through the medium of the mural, or does the mural act as the object of desire under the tourist gaze of Western intellectuals?